In the cozy house of the Aztane family, hidden from prying eyes under the cover of everyday life, there was a spirit of unusual brotherly love and competition. In this house grew two sisters, twins, whose destinies were as similar as they were different. At first glance, it was hard to tell them apart, but their talents and life paths diverged like rivers flowing in different directions from the same mountain. The first of the sisters was endowed with extraordinary abilities and talent, which, like a great artist, painted the world around her with the brightest colors. The Aztane family, realizing they had a rare gift before them, trained her, striving to make her an heiress to their name, a symbol of their family that would be a pride and legend for years to come. The second sister, unlike her twin, had faced difficult challenges since childhood. Her life was filled with struggles with illnesses that prevented her from opening up like her sister. But despite her physical limitations, her spirit was indestructible. She found joy in small things, in the happiness of being close to her family, especially her talented sister, whom she loved and supported with all her heart. There was an invisible thread between the sisters that bound their hearts together regardless of their life circumstances. Despite their differences, they shared joys and sorrows, successes and failures, becoming for each other not only sisters, but also the most faithful friends. The fate of the Aztane sisters was marred by tragedy at an early age when they lost their parents, leaving them to support each other in this unpredictable and often cruel world. This event was the test that shaped their future life path, forcing the particularly talented Laurencia to take on the role of elder and protector. She found the strength to not only dream and strive for more, but to fight for the future of her sister, who was so lacking in care and support after the loss of her parents. Laurencia saw her mission not only in self-improvement and development of her talent, but also in providing her sister with a life full of love and happiness, because for her, her sister's happiness was her own happiness. In her quest to create a better future for both of them, Laurencia also found support in her fiancé, a man she felt shared her dreams and values. He entered their lives as a symbol of hope for a happy future in which they could overcome the difficulties of the past together. One day, however, upon entering the room, Laurencia is confronted with a picture that ruins all her notions of future and loyalty. Before her eyes appeared her sister and her fiancé, consumed with passion for each other, kissing. This moment was a lightning bolt of lightning for Laurencia, suddenly and irrevocably changing the course of their destinies. All her efforts, dreams, and sacrifices seemed to be betrayed in an instant. This discovery forced her to rethink not only her relationships with her loved ones, but also the very essence of trust and betrayal. This moment of revelation not only shattered Laurencia's world, but also shed light on the many secrets that had shrouded their family in recent years. When Urzia noticed her sister, she didn't apologize or explain herself, but was only slightly embarrassed. But a moment later, she resolutely demanded that Laurencia leave the house that had once been their common refuge. But now, according to Urzia, Laurencia no longer lived there. Laurencia's heart grew cold. There was more in those words than just a desire to get rid of an unwanted witness. It was a sign of a deep betrayal that was rooted not in a passionate moment, but in years of deceit. The realization came to Laurencia like a thunderclap. She realized why so many of the family lands and mines that had been the foundation of their wealth and heritage had disappeared in recent years. Urzia, her own sister, was secretly selling them, pretending to be Laurencia. It was a betrayal not only personal but also familial, a blow to the foundations of their lives and future. Urzia, pretending to be Laurencia, sold off the family patrimony, undermining their financial stability and violating the trust that was the foundation of their relationship. For Laurencia, this discovery was a test that turned her view of her sister upside down. She realized that the years of care and support she had given Urzia had been betrayed. Amidst a tense moment when family ties were on the brink, Urzia turned to thank her sister with a twinkle in her eyes and genuine joy on her face. But Laurencia, whose feelings were deeply hurt, could not conceal her indignation. Urzia, in her opinion, had committed an unforgivable act by taking her fiancé away from her. She saw this act of Urzia's as a betrayal, breaking the sisterly bond and causing a wave of anger and frustration. While Laurencia tried to come to terms with the offense, Urzia made a move that only made things worse. With a carefree smile and a look filled with defiance, she kissed Laurencia's fiancé defiantly without taking her eyes off her sister. This act was full of audacity and seemed to emphasize her superiority and independence. For Laurencia, it was the last straw, the moment when all her hopes and dreams crumbled, leaving behind only the wreckage of former happiness. Unable to be in the same room any longer with a sister who so clearly disregarded her feelings and dignity, Laurentia, engulfed in a whirlwind of emotions, swiftly left the room. Her steps were swift and decisive, as was her decision to remove herself from the source of her grief. This moment not only emphasized the deep rift between the sisters, but also left the future of their relationship unresolved. Laurentia stood in silent solitude, immersed in her own reflections, unable to understand what had prompted Ursia to act so cruelly toward her. In the back of her mind, she was searching for answers to questions that seemed incomprehensible to her. The time when sisterly love and mutual understanding had been the basis of their relationship seemed irretrievably lost. Laurentia could not remember the moment when an invisible wall of hatred and misunderstanding had come between them, when Ursia had gone from indifference to outright hostility. The burden of society's judgment had been on her shoulders for a long time. To be the subject of gossip and judgmental stares because of her choice to trade openly with the commoners was her cross to bear. This path, full of obstacles and misunderstandings, Laurentia did not choose it out of frivolous motives. Every step she took, every decision she made was motivated by a deep care and devotion to her family. She saw it as her mission to ensure the well-being and stability of the home, even if it required sacrifices and personal concessions. Nevertheless, the feeling of isolation and rejection from society and now her own sister was putting pressure on Laurentia. This development made her think about how hard it is sometimes to pay for principles and beliefs, especially when support and understanding come not from people close to you, but from those who do not always share your ideals. In this stream of thought, Laurentia realized more and more that strength of mind and fidelity to her own principles was the foundation on which she was willing to build her life, despite all obstacles. In the face of betrayal and disappointment, Laurentia felt the foundations of her world begin to crumble. Her whole life was closely intertwined with the existence of her twin sister, Ursia, in whom she saw not just a kindred spirit, but a reflection of herself. Such a deep sense of betrayal experienced from her sister's actions left a wound in her heart seemingly timeless. In this moment of despondency and reflection, Laurentia remembered her grandfather's long-ago words, as if they had suddenly found their way through the fog of her thoughts. He spoke of a mysterious door in their home, a door that presents itself only to those who experience despair, who have reached the limits of their strength and seek solace or answers beyond it. Standing in front of this mysterious door, Laurentia felt a mixture of fear and hope. Her hand, trembling with mixed feelings, tentatively reached for the knob. This moment seemed to be a turning point in her life. On the one hand, it was an act of desperation, a desire to find refuge from the pain and betrayal that had darkened her soul. On the other hand, it was an act of courage, a willingness to face the unknown, perhaps to find answers to the questions that had plagued her for so long. As she reached for the door, Laurentia realized that this step could change her life. At this moment in time, she was ready to open the door, not only to the unknown room of her home, but also to a new chapter of her destiny, where her sister's betrayal would be but an echo of the past, and new horizons of exploration and self-discovery would open before her. The moment Laurentia gathered the strength and determination to reach out for the handle of the door, shrouded in secrets and legends passed down to her by her grandfather's words, she encountered an unexpected obstacle. The door, a symbol of hope and possible salvation from her torment, remained immobile despite Laurentia's best efforts. She pulled the handle again and again, each time with more despair, remembering the betrayal her sister had caused her. These thoughts only strengthened her resolve, while at the same time triggering a wave of emotions that she had long tried to escape from. Haunted by a shiver that made the air around her seem to tremble in unison with her soul, Laurentia felt the tears become uncontrollable. They flowed down her face like rivers eroding the last barriers of despair, and at that moment, when her emotions were at their peak, the door gave way. What had previously seemed an insurmountable obstacle suddenly became malleable, and the door opened as if recognizing her right to a new path. Laurentia, who had not expected such sudden obedience to the door, lost her balance and fell to the floor beyond the threshold. In that moment, she felt not only a physical release from a barrier that seemed insurmountable, but also a metaphorical step into a new, uncharted chapter of her life. Falling to the floor outside the door symbolized her willingness to accept and experience the changes this new beginning brought. She lay there amidst tears and dashed hopes, but there was a spark of reassurance in the back of her mind that perhaps here, Behind this door, she would find something that would help her heal her wounds and feel whole again. At one point, as if fate itself had decided to intervene in the usual course of things, Laurentia felt the light touch of a cool breeze playing with her hair. It was as if from afar her grandfather's familiar and so dear voice, filled with warmth and care, was calling her to him. This moment was so unexpected and magical that the girl opened her eyes in a second, expecting to see something incredible in front of her. A picture of eternal tranquility and bliss had already begun to form in her imagination, where she seemed to have crossed the threshold of death and found herself where there was no pain and suffering, in a place that people used to call paradise. The reality, however, was different. The grandfather stood before her alive, looking at his granddaughter with curiosity and incomprehension, unable to understand where such notes of amazement and joy had come from in her voice. His question about whether she'd had a good dream sounded so simple and ordinary that Laurentia stood still for a moment, trying to put the pieces of what was happening together into a coherent picture. The girl's mind was still full of images and feelings of despair from the world she had so vividly imagined only moments ago. Now she had to return to reality, where her loving grandfather was looking at her with concern and interest, waiting for an answer. This transition from dream to reality, from the expectation of something mystical and unfathomable to the ordinary, but no less valuable reality of family comfort and mutual understanding, was filled with deep meaning. Laurentia, feeling uneasy at her sudden awakening and strange sensations, followed her grandfather, whom she had so unexpectedly met after her brief journey between the worlds of dreams and reality. Their footsteps led them back to the house in which the girl had spent many warm and happy moments of her childhood. As the sun began to slope toward dusk, they approached the house, and immediately the faithful dog met them, wagging his tail happily and as if to say with his joy, "Welcome home." Grandfather, always full of participation and warmth, invited Laurentia inside, and at that moment she was suddenly acutely aware of how much the atmosphere of the mansion had changed. Just a few minutes ago, to her, this was a dismal and most horrible place on earth. But now, as she crossed the threshold, a wave of noise, liveliness, and bustle enveloped her, reminding her of the days when Grandpa was full of vigor and energy, and the house literally pulsed with life. The maids going about their business brought a sense of domesticity and care into the space of the mansion, and the noise and clamor of the house filled Laurentia's heart with warmth and hope. She remembered how this house had been full of life and joy before her grandfather died, and how keenly she felt his absence when the house became quiet and empty. But now that the surroundings were lively again, Laurentia felt her soul fill with light, and it was as if the very reality around her had changed, becoming brighter and warmer. On that particular day, Laurentia found herself working on paperwork again, but this time not alone. Her grandfather was by her side, as he had been in her childhood days. Thinking back to the old days when, as a little girl, she had always turned to him for help and advice on anything, including paperwork, Laurentia felt like she was that little girl again, full of hopes and dreams. She believed that their work together, their moments together, would last forever. However, fate had decided otherwise. A tragic incident cut short Grandpa's life when Laurentia and her sister Ursia were only 18 years old each. This event placed a heavy burden on Laurentia's shoulders, to become the head of the family. In this new capacity, she had to put aside her grief and sorrow as she faced new tasks and responsibilities. However, everything changed when Laurentia got a unique chance to go back in time. This unexpected twist of fate gave her the opportunity not only to correct her mistakes and make other decisions, but also to feel the warmth and support of her grandfather, who was now close to her again. These moments of reunion were for Laurentia not just an opportunity to spend time together with a dear person, but also a chance to relive those feelings and emotions that she thought were lost forever. Working with the documents together with the grandfather took on a new meaning, becoming a symbol of the restored connection between past and present, between granddaughter and grandfather, between the lost and the found. Taking care of the documents, the atmosphere around was so warm and trusting that Laurentia decided to share her experiences with him, but chose an unusual way to do it. She described her recent tragic life events as a terrible dream in which she was betrayed by someone very close to her, and in this nightmare, the betrayal resulted in her being unable to fulfill the last request of someone important to her. This story, though presented as a dream, was a real cry of the soul, a reflection of her inner fears and experiences. Grandpa listened attentively and felt the depth of her pain and loneliness. When Laurentia finished her story, her eyes were full of tears, reflecting the weight of the dream she had experienced. Then Grandpa, with an affectionate expression on his face, gently wiped away her tears, as if trying to wipe away the very pain they carried as well. His words were warm and comforting. He said that the nightmare was over, that they were together again, and there was an unshakable confidence in his voice that any darkness would dissipate in the light of a new day. Grandfather then advised Laurentia to rest, for he said another significant event awaited them, the arrival of a guest. This advice was not just a call for physical rest, but an opportunity to strengthen her state of mind, to prepare for new challenges and encounters that could bring healing and new perspectives to her life. There was wisdom and foresight embedded in these words from Grandpa, emphasizing his deep connection and understanding of his granddaughter's needs. Repulsed by her grandfather's wise words and influenced by the deep thoughts their conversation had provoked, Laurentia felt that the moment had come to act rather than to wallow in sadness and despair. She realized that she had a unique opportunity not just to prevent future betrayal, but to understand its roots, to unravel the motives that might have driven Ursha to such a decision. This realization gave her strength and determination, for now her goal was not only to protect her future, but perhaps to save the relationship she valued above all else. With these thoughts, filled with determination and a desire to expose the truth, Laurentia made her way to Ersia. Her steps were firm and sure, for in her heart now burned not only the fire of devotion to family and friends, but also the desire for understanding and forgiveness. Approaching Ersia, Laurentia was full of hope to find answers to the questions that plagued her, and perhaps to open a new page in their relationship, a page where betrayal would remain only a dark stain in their past that they could overcome together. Laurentia, with a deep sigh, gently knocked on the door that separated her from Ursia's world. As soon as the door softly opened, she stepped inside, where a scene of warm, sisterly love was revealed to her gaze. Ursia did not hold back the joy of the unexpected meeting, shining like a star in the night sky. The light of her smile made her forget all the worries of the day. Laurentia, preoccupied with the endless succession of cares and duties that had lately fallen upon her shoulders like a heavy cloak, could not help noticing how her sister had blossomed at their meeting. With curiosity mixed with a note of weariness, her question to Ursia about whether she felt tired after a day full of events and worries sounded. But Ursia's answer was full of care and ease, her sweet smile making it impossible to doubt the sincerity of her words. She argued that it was Laurentia who was undoubtedly exhausted from a day full of hardship and work, emphasizing this with her soft tone and attentive gaze. Ursia, despite her pretty smile and easygoing personality, left room for speculation as to the genuineness of her feelings. Her words, filled with concern, at the same time seemed wrapped in a thin veil of mystery, making me wonder if she was hiding her true emotions behind a mask of joyful calm. Laurentia, still hoping to penetrate the veil of mystery that Ursha had so skillfully kept around her, tried carefully, like a jeweler working with a particularly valuable stone, to extract some information. She searched for the key to her sister's heart and thoughts, trying to understand the true motives and feelings behind her serene facade. But Urzia, as if reading Laurentia's mind, skillfully diverted the conversation away from her personal worries to the upcoming event that was to mark the day. With unexpected ease and at the same time attention to detail, Urzia began to broach the subject of the guest's upcoming visit, which she said was to be an event not just significant, but extremely special. Her voice filled with excitement, and a spark of anticipation lit up in her eyes, which only added intrigue to the conversation. Ercia, with skillfully concealed delight, emphasized that Laurentia was the very link that attracted such distinguished guests, which undoubtedly spoke of her exclusivity and importance. As she left Ursia's room, Laurentia was enveloped in a halo of mingled feelings and thoughts that followed her like shadows through the corridors of their common home. The cause of this inner turmoil was something beyond the ordinary perception of time. In her unusual journey through time, Laurentia encountered an event, a betrayal that left an indelible mark on her soul and memories, becoming a rift in her relationship with her sister. This rift, though invisible to others, was a deep and painful wound for Laurentia. The meeting with Ursia, joyful and carefree at first sight, became a test for Laurentia, for in her heart there coexisted both warm feelings for her sister from the past and the cold residue of betrayal that was to take place in the future. With every moment spent by Ursula's side, Laurentia became more and more acutely aware of how difficult it was to keep faith and trust in someone when you already knew what trials lay ahead. Laurentia immersed herself in thinking about the complexity of human relationships, especially when they are experienced through the lens of knowledge of the future that is incompatible with the present. This duality of feelings, when on the one hand you want to appreciate and cherish the available moments of joy and closeness, and on the other hand, it is impossible to get rid of the weight of betrayal, which has not yet happened, but has already left an indelible imprint on the soul, has become a real test. Her mind was full of questions, the most pressing of which was not understanding the reasons for Ursula's action. All her thoughts were focused on solving this mystery, but when Laurentia traveled back in time, she found herself unable to even look into Ursula's eyes. This tacit admission of her powerlessness in the face of the past forced her soul to search for answers on its own. Immersing herself in the atmosphere of the manor, which seemed shrouded in anticipation of something great, Laurentia felt that the events to come were important. There was a troublesome atmosphere on the estate, and a foreboding of imminent change was in the air. She knew at once that these preparations were connected with the arrival of a guest whose presence could change the course of history. Though this man's face remained hidden behind the shroud of oblivion in her memory, her intuition told her of his key role in the events to come. Thus, the only thing left to do was to wait for this mysterious guest, whose meeting would perhaps set the record straight in the sad story of betrayal that had unfolded around Laurentia. There was a mixture of anxiety and hope that soon all the secrets would be revealed, and Laurentia would be able to find answers to the questions that plagued her without having to confront the past that had so painfully affected her heart. Laurentia, armed with courage and determination, prepared to meet her guest, believing in herself and her ability to take everything she was about to learn in stride. However, in this flood of preparation and expectation, she overlooked one detail that had the power to overturn all her plans and intentions. For among the arrivals was another character whose presence was no less painful to her than the betrayal itself, the Marquis Berlit. His face, in an instant capable of unleashing a wave of resentment and pain, was the last thing Laurentia wanted to see at a moment like this. For every glance at the Marquis reminded her of the betrayal, leaving a deep scar on her heart. Today, Laurentia's 17th birthday was to be a turning point in her life. It was the very day on which the Marquis Berlit was scheduled to propose to her, a proposal that in other circumstances might have been the beginning of a new chapter in her life. However, circumstances had changed, and what may have once seemed like a dream now turned into a nightmare that Laurentia sought to avoid. Meeting the Marquis Berlit was a test that Laurentia had to pass, despite all the pain and frustration that this presence in her life caused her. Berlit, a person whose ambitions and aspirations were admired by many, represented not only the embodiment of power and influence, but also symbolized the possibility of a powerful alliance that could change the political landscape of their world. In the original timeline, thanks to an engagement between the houses of Berlit and Laurentia, the foundation was laid for this powerful alliance. An alliance that heralded not only the strengthening of their family dynasties, but also promised a new era of prosperity and influence, extending their dominance to distant lands and bringing stability to the region. Today, on this momentous day when Laurentia was 17 years old, it was today that this great union was to have its beginning. It was the kind of event that in other circumstances might have been greeted with joy and celebration. A day that was to mark the beginning of a new chapter in the history of both families, becoming the culmination of years of plans and hopes for their future. However, instead of anticipation of joy and celebration, the day came with heaviness and uncertainty for Laurentia, in whose heart the betrayal had left a deep wound. At that moment, as silence enveloped the room, which was filled with the fine fragrance of wood and freshness, Berlit, with a graceful smile on his lips, made a graceful bow before Lawrence. In Laurentia's hands, as if by themselves, blue roses of extraordinary beauty. Their petals seemed to melt under the soft light of the room, creating an aura of mystery and magic. These flowers were no mere gift of nature. They were the work of alchemy, the art of transformation and creation to which Berlit gave himself entirely in the pursuit of perfection. Through a smile, he mouthed that he had invested a good deal of time in thinking of a gift that would surprise and delight. And so the solution was found. It was this unusual beauty that he felt was worthy of Laurentia, reflecting her inner light and uniqueness. Laurentia, for her part, stood before him, veiled in a veil of restrained emotion, her eyes twinkling with surprise and bewilderment. There were sparks in her gaze that portended a storm, and she clutched the stems of the magic flowers tightly in her hands. Just as the atmosphere in the room began to heat up from the unresolved tension between Laurentia and Berlit, a voice suddenly sounded. It was Grandpa, whose voice, imbued with wisdom and ease, brought a sense of calm and peace into the room, making everyone momentarily forget the tension that had just prevailed. Grandpa, despite his advanced age, had an amazing ability to resolve conflicts. His words were like balm for the soul, and even the most aggravated moments seemed not so insoluble when he entered into dialogue. A few seconds later, as if by command or magic sign, Ursia ran into the room. Her appearance was no less sudden, and she, radiant with energy and joy, added to the liveliness of the room. Ursia, always full of enthusiasm and interest in life, instantly became the center of attention. Her arrival seemed to finally dispel the remnants of tension, leaving only the expectation of something magical and pleasant. At this moment, Berlit, like the conductor of an orchestra, determined to do his part in creating a festive atmosphere, ordered one of the servants to bring the presents he had prepared not only for Laurentia, but also for grandfather and Ursia. At this moment, when the atmosphere in the room had already begun to fill with warmth and expectation of something joyous, Berlit, with unfailing elegance and care, turned to Ursia. In his hands glistened red roses, a symbol of passion and beauty, which he handed to the young girl with warm words. He emphasized that Ursia was as beautiful as Laurentia, skillfully distributing her attention and giving each of them a sense of specialness and importance. But as Laurentia looked at the roses that flashed in Ursia's hands with the bright colors of life and passion, a not altogether pleasant episode came to her mind. The moment when she had unwittingly witnessed that very kiss between Ursia and Berlitas suddenly came crashing down on her, causing a wave of discomfort. What shouldn't have happened at all was revealed to Laurentia, leaving behind an unpleasant residue. The memory of that moment was so vivid and painful that it took Laurentia's breath away, and that very unpleasant nausea rose in her stomach. This feeling made me revisit many moments of the past and take a fresh look at the relationships between loved ones. This episode was a reminder to her of how easily a world filled with beauty and harmony can be disrupted by one careless act, after which it becomes a challenge to restore previous understanding. At this moment, when the air was saturated with anxiety and uncertainty, Grandfather felt a deep anxiety for Laurentia. His gaze, full of care and concern, could not leave indifferent, but Laurentia, absorbed in her own worries, perceived the world through the prism of her inner drama. Her gaze slid back and forth between the groom and her sister, as if trying to find answers to her tormenting questions in their faces. But burdened with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved feelings, she could not bear the tension that enveloped the room, and on a sudden impulse she fled, leaving only the echo of her footsteps behind her. Away from view, in solitude, Laurentia faced a storm of emotions. She couldn't understand how for so many years she'd been blind to such an obvious fact of infidelity that seemed to be hidden right before her eyes. In this moment of self-discovery, it was as if she was seeing for the first time the true face of a reality that had previously seemed completely different to her. After rushing to the bathroom to collect her thoughts and find solace in solitude, Laurentia was faced with the need to come back to reality. As she left the bathroom and faced the concerned faces that came running after her, she couldn't hide her exhaustion. In a weak voice, barely concealing her vulnerability, she announced that she was feeling ill and would prefer to remove herself from everything that was going on by retiring to her room. It was not only a physical shelter from the world, but an attempt to find solace in solitude to deal with the storm of emotions that raged in her soul. In the heart of events where past and present intertwine in a magical dance of fate, Laurentia found herself. She had the unique ability to foresee the future through a miraculous return to the past. This gift allowed her to be aware of every turn of events long before they unfolded before the world. Despite this great wisdom, however, each new day remained a field of surprises for her. The surprises of life were sometimes so overwhelming that even Laurentia, armed with knowledge of the future, could not foresee all the vicissitudes of fate. But there was something that drove her into a particularly deep thought and indignation. This betrayal, by the sinister design of fate, had begun much earlier than Laurentia had anticipated, and this discovery wounded her more deeply than anything else. But even so, Laurentia still wanted to believe that her perception of events had been distorted, that the betrayal that had hurt her so deeply might have been just a figment of her imagination. Just as the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions was enveloping Laurentia, her grandfather knocked quietly on the door of her room, as if not wanting to disturb the fragile atmosphere of his granddaughter's musings. His sudden appearance brought the warmth and comfort of home to a moment of serious reflection. Grandfather, always sensitive and attentive to his granddaughter, brought her an apple pie, Laurencia's favorite treat, which never ceased to delight her and remind her of the carefree days of childhood. He inquired with care about Laurencia's health, expressing his support and love not only through words but also through little things like homemade pie. It was exactly what Laurencia needed at that moment, to feel the support and care of loved ones. Grandfather also brought news from Berlit, who, in spite of all doubts and worries, had expressed his desire for an engagement to Laurencia. The message was an unexpected ray of light in the fog of doubt and betrayal that had previously shrouded Laurencia's thoughts. When Laurencia tried to express her feelings, her voice shook with tension and emotion, as if she was fighting her inner demons before she could express her thoughts aloud. Her grandfather, attentive and perceptive, looked at her with understanding, not even needing words to grasp the gist of what was happening. He emphasized that Laurencia's opinion was important to him, reaffirming his unconditional support for her. Gathering her strength, Laurencia declared sharply, with steel in her voice, that she hated Berlit. This confession was so unexpected that even grandfather, usually so reserved and wise, could not hide his astonishment. His reaction, a laugh, was instantaneous, but it was followed by a serious comment indicating that Berlit was not accustomed to taking no for an answer. This moment opened a deep rift in the relationship between Laurencia and Berlit, indicating the complexity of their relationship, where feelings and commitments intertwine into a tight knot that requires resolution. Grandpa's sudden gesture as he extracted the invitation from his pocket was another turning point in this convoluted story. Laurencia, noting his actions with displeasure, grudgingly accepted the elegant envelope. Her mind whirled with memories of how, in the original passage of time, Berlit had solemnized the engagement at the ball. This moment made her seriously consider the possibility of ignoring the upcoming event to avoid public humiliation and internal discomfort. However, as Laurencia unfolded the invitation and carefully read its contents, a spark of inspiration flashed through her mind. The words on the paper might have been more than a simple notice of an event. It was something that made her look at the situation from a different angle, providing an unexpected solution or idea that made Laurencia decide she should go to the ball. Maybe she saw it as a chance to use the situation to her advantage, or maybe it was an opportunity to make a difference. Whatever the reason, this moment of decision became a tipping point in her journey, symbolizing not just the choice to attend the event, but an inner strength, a desire to face the challenges ahead, despite all the difficulties and troubles that could await her. A seed of doubt began to germinate in Laurencia's heart, gradually blossoming into a conviction that Berlit's motives might be far from as pure as she had supposed. She decided that his interest in her and her family might have been purely material, that his courtship and concern were only a mask behind which lust for the wealth of her kind lurked. Realizing that her feelings and trust might have been the subject of a devious game, Laurencia set her resolve to act. She decided that she would not allow Berlit to manipulate her family's fate for her own gain. The thought had solidified in her heart that the only way to protect her legacy and her family's future was to break the engagement, even if it brought her personal pain and suffering. This decision did not come easily to her. It was a deliberate and difficult step that she took with courage and determination. Laurencia knew the challenges ahead, but she felt strongly that it was necessary to take this step to protect everything she held dear. At the dawn of the day, which many had eagerly anticipated, the atmosphere was filled with a special anticipation. The day of the ball, which has long been a symbol of splendor and celebration, has arrived, awakening dreams and hopes in the hearts of the guests. Laurencia, whose life had long flowed away from these events, was once again in the midst of holiday preparations. She couldn't help but recognize the excitement that enveloped her at the thought of the upcoming evening, which promised to be the beginning of a new chapter in her life. When Berlit approached her, his presence immediately caused a wave of irritation. Nevertheless, Berlit, despite her obvious irritation, began showering Laurencia with compliments. He skillfully emphasized how hard it had been for him since their last encounter, trying to perhaps melt the ice in their relationship. But Laurentia, meeting his words with skepticism, did not allow herself to give in to the pressure of his attention. Her reaction to his compliments and attempts to make amends for past failures was unyielding. Laurentia hadn't expected him to say that, and she wasn't ready to take it on faith. At that moment, tension rose between them, palpable as a thin film of ice separating the two worlds. In that moment, filled with anticipation and unspoken feelings, Berlit made a move that could change everything. He took Lawrence's hand as if inviting her into a world of dance and music where every step and glance had a special meaning. This gesture, under ordinary circumstances, could have been taken as a sign of attention and respect. Laurentia, whose position in society dictated certain rules of conduct, realized that her status did not allow her to reject such an invitation lightly. However, despite external circumstances and the expectations of others, she acted unexpectedly, demonstrating her independence and strength of mind. Laurentia gently but firmly removed her hand from his grasp, thus startling Berlit and perhaps quelling his hopes of renewing their relationship. This act did not go unnoticed. The eyes of the crowd of aristocrats gathered at the ball fixed on them, making this moment the center of everyone's attention. The tension in the room was palpable to everyone present. But for Laurentia, this act was not merely an expression of personal reluctance to dance with Berlit. It was a statement of her autonomy and right to choose who to be with and what decisions to make, even if it went against society's expectations. The moment the silence between Laurentia and Berlitus became almost palpable, she dutifully voiced her concern at his behavior. Laurentia's words, weighted and finely framed, sounded like an echo in a space filled with stares and expectations. She was absolutely conscious of the fact that the Marquis Berlit, a high-ranking and respected member of the aristocracy, could not be publicly humiliated without repercussions, especially when such a statement came from the granddaughter of a viscount. It wasn't just expressing an opinion, it was an act of delicate but decisive balancing between expressing one's own position and maintaining respect for social norms and hierarchy. After making a deep bow, which in this context was not only a sign of respect but also a symbol of the end of their exchange, Laurentia turned to leave. Her movements were graceful and full of grace, as if each step had been thought out and weighed in advance. Inwardly, however, she anticipated the rumors that would soon break out about her allegedly arrogant behavior. There was no doubt in her heart about the inevitability of the gossip that would follow her like shadows after this incident. This moment was a test for Laurentia, a demonstration of her inner strength and ability to stand up for her beliefs despite the possible consequences for her reputation among high society. Laurentia, a girl whose life was peppered with rumors and whispers, found the strength to ignore them. She was used to the endless stream of conversations that hovered behind her back, like shadows following their owner on a bright sunny day. But if rumors were just annoying flies she could brush off, talking to people was a real problem. Laurentia felt like a stranger in the world of conversations and interactions, as if she was the swan among the ducks who, despite her beauty, still remained lonely because of her otherness. Her attention, which had been so difficult to attract by anything, was captured by a man whose appearance in her life was as sudden as thunder. This man was none other than Duke Berdian, a man enchanting not only externally but internally as well. Duke Berdian had that rare gift which enabled him to win hearts not by effort, but by the naturalness of his being. His charm was not contrived or artificial. It came from the depths of his soul, making him irresistible to all who came near him. The aristocracy, with their unquenchable thirst for gossip and rumor, found in the figure of the Duke of Berdian a source of unceasing interest, even more extensive than that which they gave to Laurentia herself. In this glittering yet intrigue-ridden world, the empire, like an ancient tree, was held on the strong roots of two duchies, among which Berdian held a special place. This family, whose history was steeped in military exploits and glory, faced a dark cloud of scandal when the head of the household was accused of a deed shrouded in the darkness of medieval prejudice, sodomy. This accusation left an indelible stain on the family's reputation, causing a storm of discussion among the nobility. Laurentia, watching all this gloom of intrigue, could not help but think of Ian Berdian, the heir and symbol of this duchy, who, it seemed to her, must be weary of the endless judgments and whispers going on behind his back. Her thoughts often drifted to what it was like to live under such a weight of accusations, when every move was scrutinized and debated, and every word could be the cause of a new round of gossip. Ian Berdian, in spite of his charming appearance and noble manners, was no doubt a man of heavy burden, for even his virtues and successes could not entirely overshadow the dark stains on the family reputation. This train of thought brought Lorenzia to the realization that perhaps Ian Berdian and she had much more in common than first thought. The thought that Ian might also be looking for understanding and support like herself made Lawrence look at him from a different angle, to see him not only as a duke with a scandalous reputation, but as a man suffering from misunderstanding and loneliness. Ian, the Duke of Berdian, suddenly slid his gaze in Lorencia's direction, and at that moment she felt the color of unexpected shame spill over her cheeks. Lorencia's heart beat faster, as if it wanted to run away from this look, this moment that seemed more intimate than any words. Unable to bear the weight of the Duke's gaze, Lorencia turned away, as if she wanted to hide her timidity from his scrutiny. Without looking back, she hurried away, feeling each step grow heavier, just as her heart grew heavy with a strange excitement. Strolling through the castle garden in the dark of night, Lorencia was deep in thought. She thought about how to change her life, how to get out of this vicious circle she had gotten herself into. Maybe she needed something sharp, something to make Berlit stop insisting on the engagement. The idea suddenly sprang into her mind like a light in a dark corridor. She pondered the possibility of marrying someone other than the Duke of Berlitz. But for all her determination, there were no suitable candidates on the horizon. Perhaps her life was meant to be tied to these two duchies. Lorencia's fate was written with a pen she could not control. Would Lorencia somehow be able to find a way to get rid of Berlit or not? It was even a little annoying. In that unexpected moment, when the silence of the airspace around Lorencia was suddenly broken by a loud scream, her heart sank with surprise. That sound belonged to Berlit, a young man who looked at her with obvious confusion and bewilderment, as if his world had suddenly been turned upside down. Lorencia, sensing the tension of the moment, tried to gracefully avoid further conversation, preferring to put this uncomfortable situation behind her. Berlit, however, in a burst of emotion, unwilling to let Lawrence go so easily, grasped her arm resolutely. His words sounded like a sentence. He declared that Lorencia was bound to give her consent to the engagement, as if it had been decided for them both without any doubt in his voice. At that moment, as the atmosphere around them became more and more tense and unpredictable, something happened that no one could have foreseen. Out of nowhere, a strange hand appeared and grabbed Berlit's arm with a deft and decisive grip, forcing him to let go of Lorencia. The owner of this hand, Duke Ian Berdian, stood in front of them with a sincere smile on his face, as if he was not just a witness to their argument, but a person bringing a note of reason and nobility to this situation. With the ease and grace of a true aristocrat, Duke Berdian observed that Berlit's behavior was highly improper, emphasizing it with his smile and a look filled with calm and authority. It was a moment when the air around seemed to freeze in anticipation of further action, and the Duke became not only Lorencia's protector, but also a symbol of justice and nobility in this unexpected tangle of fates. The mystery of Grand Duke Ian Berdian's presence in the place remained unsolved to all present, adding to the mystery of an already tense scene. Berlit, feeling the weight of the Duke's gaze, began to back away clumsily, trying to justify himself. Words of misunderstanding came out of his mouth, as if he was trying to convince not only the Duke but himself that what had happened was just a series of accidents and not something more serious. In his eagerness to evade responsibility, Berlit hastened to assure that his relations with Lawrence were at such a high level that an engagement between them was just around the corner, as if this were an immutable fact that should justify his act. Duke Ian, scrutinizing the situation, thought for a moment regarding the incident as an ordinary quarrel between two people, which, in his opinion, might have been the result of a misunderstanding or temporary disagreement. At the same time, Lorencia, standing nearby, was seized with shock and bewilderment at the whole situation. Her gaze, fixed on Berlit, was full of amazement at how easily and casually he could lie to create the illusion of a happy relationship between them. Despair was growing in her heart, and in her imagination invisible fetters were beginning to form, symbolizing the restrictions and coercion which Berlit was trying to impose upon her under the guise of a future engagement. These moments were for Lorencia the living embodiment of fear and helplessness in the face of Berlit's attempts to control her life under the guise of care and attention. In a moment of desperation and helplessness, Lorencia found the strength to instantly counter. She kicked Berlit's leg vigorously, expressing her protest and refusal to submit to his intrusive demands. This unexpected gesture of resistance caused Berlitus to burst out in anger, and unable to restrain his emotion, he swung at Laurentia. His gaze, full of contempt and fury, was like the one he had looked at her with on that fateful day when Laurentia had first felt defenseless and humiliated, like an insect that could be crushed with a single movement. However, the story took an unexpected turn when Duke Ian Berdian intervened, addressing Berlit with an imperious and adamant tone that made him freeze in place, as if temporarily depriving him of the ability to move or respond. The Duke reproachfully reminded Berlit of the high ideals of chivalry, which require every knight of the Empire to be noble of spirit, to protect those in need, and that to be a knight is not only an honor but an unalterable duty to protect the weak. Ian's words sounded like thunder as he menacingly emphasized that Berlit's actions at the moment had nothing to do with those of a true knight. This act not only demonstrated Ian's personal condemnation of Berlit's unworthy behavior, but also reminded him of the high moral standards to be followed by anyone who holds the title of knight in the Empire. In a shady corner of the lush garden, a scene filled with tension and unexpected twists and turns unfolded. Ian, dominating with his presence, suddenly grabbed Berlit, making his heart race with surprise and fear. His eyes, burning with challenge, fixed into Berlit with such intensity that the air around him seemed to thicken. But immediately, as if the clouds had cleared away, a smile appeared on his face, an unexpected turn that would have confused anyone. With that smile, he asked Berlit to leave the garden. Berlit, whose condition could only be described as shocked, barely found the strength to comprehend what was happening. He felt fear freeze in his veins when Ian sharply emphasized that this was an order, not a mere wish, but an order. Ian's words acted on Berlit like a cold shower, forcing him to act instinctively. With fear in his heart and disbelief in his feet, he took off at a run, leaving behind only a cloud of dust and a jumble of emotions. His departure was as abrupt as Ian's change in mood, leaving behind unanswered questions. Alone in this green sanctuary, Laurentia and Ian found a moment of peace and quiet after the storm of emotion and tension that had just swirled past them. Laurentia pondered her next steps. She felt the need to express her gratitude to Ian for his decisive action, which not only resolved the tense situation, but also left them in privacy, providing an opportunity for more personal interaction. But when she finally found the strength to speak words of gratitude, Ian met them with an unexpected statement. With ease, as if it were a matter of course, he noted that he expected not just thanks, but something more tangible, implying payment for his services. The statement struck Laurentia as much as Ian's previous actions, leaving her mildly confused. His straightforwardness and directness in expressing his desires reminded her of her faithful dog, Nara, who always demanded affection and attention after returning from patrol. Nar, with his loyal canine soul, was always looking for physical recognition of his accomplishments, and in this Ian seemed to be his double. Even in appearance, Ian resembled Nara. Their coloring, if one could say that about humans, bore a remarkable resemblance, which further reinforced that association in Laurentia's eyes. Reflecting on that comparison, Laurentia caught herself thinking that she might well have responded to Ian's request the same way she had done with Nar, with a simple gesture of affection. Ian, with particular attention to detail, expressed his admiration for the Laurentia family's business abilities. He confidently emphasized that the help he gave to Laurentia would not go unnoticed and appreciated by her influential family. Laurentia, for her part, was caught off guard not only by the very fact that Ian knew about her and her family, but also by the unfathomable contrast in his behavior. She remembered their previous meeting at the ball, where his manners had been quite different, and could not understand what had caused such a radical change in his treatment of her. Laurentia's attempt to address Ian using his official title was met with an unexpected reaction. With an adamancy in his voice and a gesture that emphasized the seriousness of his intentions, Ian insisted that Laurentia call him simply by his first name. This behavior of Ian's left Laurentia in a state of slight confusion, while also making her curious about his personality and his true motives. The moment Laurentia expressed her reaction, it made Ian cringe. She, with a lightness that penetrated the heart, suggested that Ian address her as informally as possible, simply by her first name, which was a surprise to him and resulted in a hearty laugh. Laurentia bowed gracefully, as if there was more than gratitude in that gesture, as a sign of respect and recognition of mutual friendship. She spoke words full of weight and promise, asserting that she and her family live by a code of honor that debts are always repaid. This moment was an important point in their relationship, emphasizing the depth of respect and commitment to each other. When it came time to talk about remuneration, Laurentia offered to let Ian determine for himself what a fair price would be for his services, promising that her family would not hesitate to fulfill their promise. Ian's response was light and playful, yet revealing the deeper meaning of their dialogue. The more the better. The moment Ian slowly raised two fingers in the air, a whirlwind of emotion swept through Laurentia's heart. The sum of 2,000 gold pieces seemed astronomical to her, but the gesture was nothing more than a delusion. She was relieved when she caught his words as he hastened to clarify that his request was for only 2 gold coins. As he left, Ian did not miss the opportunity to emphasize his noble nature, saying that even in the absence of material reward, he would not refuse to come to the rescue. In his words sounded the unshakable confidence of a man for whom the observance of knightly duty is above any riches. Laurentia remained standing, stunned by this gesture of unprecedented generosity and nobility. Her gaze, full of wonder and admiration, followed Ian as he, like a duke from ancient legends, motioned for her to come inside together. At that moment, time seemed to stop for Laurentia. Doubt and hesitation still throbbed in her heart, but the offer sounded too tempting to refuse. With slight uncertainty, but still with hope in her heart, she accepted Ian's hand to return to the ball together. Walking beside him, she allowed herself to imagine for a moment that she was part of something great and unknown, part of a story filled with nobility and valor that would be retold for generations to come. In the whirlwind of events, shrouded in an aura of mystery and unpredictability, Ian suddenly noticed the need to change Laurentia's outfit. His words, spoken suddenly and sharply, took her by surprise. It was so sudden that, for a moment, her eyes flashed with a sense of utter confusion and amazement. Like a wave crashing on a calm shore, Ian's words had thrown her soul into turmoil. In this maelstrom of feeling and emotion, Ian, like a hero of a novel, threw his jacket over Laurentia's shoulders with gallantry. This gesture, imbued with both concern and indifference, added mystery to their relationship. His gesture was as ambiguous as their whole conversation. Then, without giving her even a glimpse of what had happened, he disappeared from her sight, heading for the ball. Laurentia was left alone, immersed in a maelstrom of speculation. Laurentia could not understand what had moved Ian at that moment, the desire to protect her from possible misunderstanding by society, or just a spontaneous impulse that had no deep meaning. His departure left her confused and intrigued at the same time, becoming yet another mystery in their complicated relationship. As the golden rays of morning light penetrated the room, illuminating every corner of it with a warm glow, Laurentia stood at the window of her study, absorbed in thought. Important documents had been placed in her hands which required immediate and careful examination. She realized the gravity and complexity of the situation in which she found herself. Her mind was spinning with thoughts of Berlit, that ominous silhouette in their lives from which she thought there was no escape. Berlit had the power to unite all Dorians against her, which could be the beginning of her end. In this bleak picture of the future, where every shadow seemed an ominous harbinger of impending trouble, the only ray of light was Ian's help. Thanks to his invaluable support and participation, Laurentia could still breathe freely, feeling a solid support behind her. Ian had become not only her helper, but also her protector, able to ward off any threat. His determination and willingness to stand up for her gave Laurentia the strength not to despair and to keep fighting. All these documents lying before her were not just papers. They were a symbol of the war she was waging, not only with the external enemy in the form of Berlitz, but also with her own fears and doubts. She realized that without Ian, her chances against this adversary would be slim to none. His ability to see a way out of the most desperate situations and his selfless help were the solid foundation on which her hope of victory rested. Digging deeper into the essence of the documents brought to her, Laurentia slowly but surely made her way through the dense forest of red tape and useless information that seemed to have been created only to make the search for the truth more difficult. With each leaf she turned, she became more and more immersed in a world of numbers and reports that opened her eyes to unexpected aspects of running the duchy. And so, after hours of intense analysis, she found what she was looking for, the duchy's budget. To her surprise, he revealed to her a picture very different from the common perceptions and rumors surrounding Ian. Contrary to popular opinion about his dissolute lifestyle and reckless profligacy, the bulk of his budget was spent on maintaining and strengthening the army. This was necessary to protect the duchy from the constant threat of countries from the north, which required considerable resources and strategic planning. Moreover, it became clear that the duchy's financial difficulties were not so much the result of Ian's irresponsible behavior as the result of a debt that had been weighing on them for years. This discovery challenged public opinion and forced a rethinking of many things. Laurentia realized she was faced with information that could change Ian's perception of himself as a ruler. Laurentia, whose attention to detail was always keen, noticed a disturbing trend in the duchy's budget. She was concerned about its small size, which she felt could undermine the stability and prosperity of their lands. In response to her remarks, a loyal servant who was standing nearby shared his observations. He noted that the palace has long and consistently allocated modest sums to support the Duke of Burdian, despite the personal efforts of Ian himself, who has repeatedly traveled to improve the financial situation of his lands in an effort to bring justice and attention to his region. However, his requests and arguments were met with indifference. His words went unheeded, as if his voice was lost among the walls of this huge palace, where everyone sought only his own benefit. Laurentia thoughtfully digested what she had heard and realized that this was no accident. She realized that it was a calculated strategy to limit the Duke's power and prevent Ian from expanding his influence. It was like a finely woven web in which every move the Duke made to strengthen his position was met with invisible resistance, created not through overt confrontation, but through cunning manipulation of resources. Laurentia realized that their opponents were playing a long game, where the stakes were much higher than they seemed at first glance, and success in this game required not only intelligence and cunning, but also the ability to see the hidden threats behind the mask of bureaucratic routine. In this world where every step could be decisive and every word carried weight, Laurentia and Ian had to find a way to overcome the obstacles created by their unseen enemies to protect their duchy and ensure its future prosperity. Under the heavy weight of the musings and strategic plans that hung in the air of the palace, Laurentia suddenly felt a clarity of thought, as if a ray of light had broken through the clouds of doubt, illuminating the true nature of the problem. This insight compelled her to act immediately, and she resolutely demanded that a carriage be prepared for immediate departure to the Duke. Her sudden demand took the butler by surprise. His usually imperturbable face expressed surprise and bewilderment at such haste and determination in Laurentia's voice. Meanwhile, in his office, Duke Ian was immersed in a world of numbers and text, dealing with the piles of documents that demanded his urgent attention and decisions. Each sheet of paper carried new challenges and problems that needed immediate resolution. When Laurentia had burst into this world of focus and work, Ian couldn't hide his surprise. Laurentia's visits were always significant, but the suddenness of their arrival added to the sense of something important that couldn't be delayed. His initial surprise was quickly replaced by a warm smile, for the arrival of an old friend at such times was like a breeze dispelling the clouds of doubt and fatigue. Ian intuitively sensed that Laurentia had come for a reason. Her appearance heralded a new turn in their common cause, perhaps even the key to solving some of the problems he'd been working so hard to solve. In this meeting between friends and allies, the possibility of new collaborations and strategies that could change the course of their common affairs for the better matured. In one of those moments when fate decides to play by its own rules, Laurentia, against Ian's expectations and suggestions to move to a more cozy living room, chose to sit right in front of him. This unexpected choice of location was a kind of silent challenge, gently transgressing the traditional boundaries of personal space and invitation. Ian, unperturbed and full of good-naturedness, met her decision with a warm smile, as if there was some secret wisdom in Laurentia's gesture which he gladly accepted. With the ease usually reserved for old friends or close acquaintances, he voiced the assumption that the purpose of her visit was to pay off a debt that was measured in 2 gold coins. Laurentia, without wasting a moment, confirmed his conjecture by action, taking out from her pocket exactly 2 gold coins. With a grace and ease that could be compared to a skilled swordsman executing a simple but graceful maneuver, she tossed the coins to Ian. He, in turn, demonstrated incredible agility and reaction, as if he was not only a participant in this small performance, but also its illusionist, masterfully catching the coins in the air. This moment was filled with lightness and playfulness, creating an air of ease and trust between the two characters, as if they both found more than a return of a debt in this small gesture. Laurentia, observant and perceptive, couldn't help but notice the small but telling details that Ian was already preparing for the onset of winter. These preparations were thorough and thoughtful, for a military man, winter represented not just a change of season, but a series of serious challenges and dangers that could significantly affect the outcome of any endeavor. Ian, with his characteristic warrior's foresight and awareness of the realities faced in the service, shared this insight, expressing the idea that winter cannot be ignored, given all the risks and difficulties it brings. When he mentioned it, however, his attention was not on the preparations themselves, but on Laurentia. He intuitively sensed that her visit was for reasons other than those directly related to the concerns of winter. That's why he was surprised and even a little alarmed by Laurentia's admission that she had come just with the intention of solving the problem he had just mentioned. This moment took Ian by surprise, for it was clear to him that Laurentia had a deep understanding of his current affairs and the possible predicaments he faced. This realization both excited and frightened Ian, for it was rare that anyone around him could so accurately and unmistakably guess his concerns and offer to help him solve them. The moment Laurentia divulged her knowledge of the burden of debt on Ian's shoulders, the atmosphere in the room filled with tension. Her voice, imbued with confidence, cut through the silence with ease, leaving Ian in a state of mild shock at her insight. Despite his inner turmoil, Laurentia flashed a smile as if there were no secrets hidden from her all-seeing gaze. Ian, though stunned by Laurentia's impertinence, could not help laughing at the incomprehensible lightness of the moment, which for a moment dispelled the weight of his worries. Laurentia, without wasting a second, reminded her of her future position in the family, a status that was no secret to Ian. Her next gesture, however, was the true revelation. Like a magician retrieving a rabbit from a hat, she held out a receipt, a sign that she was willing to assume his debts. This offer, accompanied by the condition of helping her with her own problem, sounded like a challenge Ian couldn't ignore. It wasn't just an offer of help, it was a scheme in which every move Laurentia made was carefully thought out, and her actions directed toward a goal, pre-calculated and flawlessly executed. Laurentia, standing in front of Ian, was the epitome of power and determination, ready to take charge of the family and guide it to new horizons. Her proposal to Ian not only demonstrated her desire to solve problems together, but also emphasized her desire for cooperation and mutual assistance, which was an integral part of her character. Ian, impressed by her courage and foresight, realized that the moment of truth had arrived. The time to act together, to join forces to overcome adversity, was just around the corner. Laurentia, with unwavering confidence in her voice, promised Ian that his worries would soon dissipate like morning fog under the rays of the rising sun. Ian, for his part, couldn't help but recognize the obvious. Laurentia's offer meant repaying his debts, but it also meant incurring a new debt, this time to her. With a slight smile full of understanding and a hint of the depth of his plans, Laurentia nodded, confirming his words. Ian, feeling that the situation seemed too good to be true, began to look for a hidden meaning or condition that would reveal Laurentia's true intentions. However, Laurentia, as if reading his mind, hastened to dispel his doubts in order to establish a relationship. She assured him that she would not demand a refund, thus offering terms that seemed too generous for such a world where every action usually required reciprocity. To validate her words, she provided a family check of her home, not just a promise, but material proof of her intentions. The gesture was not only a demonstration of her nobility and willingness to come to the rescue, but also embodied the level of trust and respect she wanted to establish between them. For Ian, this was a pivotal moment. Presenting the family check was not just a financial transaction, it was an offer of an alliance based on mutual help and support. It appeared as a solid pillar to lean on in the storm, as a symbol of hope for a better future, where debts and obligations are not a burden but rather a step towards shared prosperity and understanding. In one of the quiet and secluded offices, where time seemed to slow down, there was a meeting that was destined to become a key moment in the lives of two people. Laurentia, a lady of undeniable sense of style and impressive intelligence, ran her pen across the shiny surface of the check with ease, as if playing. She wrote down on it a promise to pay Ian, whose bewilderment could easily be read on his face, 100,000 gold coins. It was done in one graceful and decisive move that could change destinies. Ian, sitting in front of Lawrence, was amazed and stunned at the same time. His amazement knew no bounds. How could the granddaughter of a viscount belonging to the highest society, but still far from royal titles, dispose of such astronomical sums? His eyes were filled with disbelief and admiration, for the sum of 100,000 gold coins was significant even for the big merchants and aristocracy. Laurentia, realizing Ian's anxiety, hastened to dispel his doubts. She explained that such a gesture should be seen as an investment. However, she offered to discuss the details of this investment after the contract is signed. It was like a game where every move had its own value, and Laurentia possessed the art of conducting such games with consummate skill. Ian, absorbed in thoughts of the events to come, felt something new and unexplored begin to emerge in his life. The talk of money had faded into the background, giving way to the anticipation of great change. For it turned out that for Laurentia, this mysterious and influential person, the promised sum was nothing more than a trifle, easily given to the wind.